Today's panel is Mastering the Digitally Enabled Shopper. One of the biggest challenges brands face today is mastering how people shop and where to reach them. A recent survey that we've done at Draper's found that stores are still the most popular place to complete purchases. And I don't think that will come to a surprise to many people in the room, but 65% of shoppers use 2 or more channels to browse, and I think that also something that was probably confirming a lot of things that people are already thinking. This is fashion, but multi-channel shopping affects all businesses, sectors, and categories. In this environment, how can we align our marketing strategies and campaigns with the way people decide which brand to buy, especially with so many influences on the buying decisions? Even just today, we've touched upon with Twitter, and even offline as well. So many businesses now use data-driven insights and strategies in a planned and measured way. In my background in retail, we're seeing a lot more personalization and targeting through segmentation. But done well, this is paying off, and I can think of a lot of brands just off top of my head, Boots, John Lewis, retail brands that are doing a great job of doing this. So with this panel, we will discuss how brands can capitalize on changes to the consumer's path to purchase and the new strategies to help them excel in the future. They'll share their first-hand experiences and innovative new approaches to driving brand and sales outcomes. So I'll get the panelists to introduce themselves. Perhaps, Jeremy, you can start.
Hi, everyone, again. Jeremy Ratcliffe, and Managing Director for Cantor Media Compete in the UK.
Hi, I'm Neil Stewart of Salmon. Probably to give you a little bit of context, we're a commerce services agency, so we work with Audi, Selfridges, and I don't know why I'm here, so we're working with Sainsbury's at the moment. So it's a very interesting context. So we're the guys that are building the new grocery platform for Sainsbury's, and correct, it went into pilot about 2 weeks ago. So maybe we can provide some insight there.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mark Warburton, and I am Head of E-commerce and Digital at United Biscuits, which you may know better as the people that make McVitie's and Jacobs. So, hello.
Great, excellent. So I guess we'll start off kind of at the beginning. We've heard a lot about the challenges of facing brands and retailers and understanding how to engage with consumers along that really diverse path to purchase. Today, particularly from a digital perspective, perhaps Jeremy, you can kick us off with perhaps highlighting one of the key challenges in this field.
Yeah, it's sort of difficult to get to one single universal challenge, but if I just sort of recap from what we've heard today, I've just written down here: price pressure, brands are dead, then they're alive again, differentiation, fast-moving markets, disparate data, long ideas, even from Gray. But for me, if the closest to a sort of universal challenge, I think, is you have to look back inside the organisations, back into the brands, and the way that some of those brands are structured, where the data and understanding of digital is sort of siloed, if you like, within those organisations. And I think the digitally enabled technology, the consumers we're all using, stretches across what were, in some organisations, silos that we used for a legacy world. So there's I think, a universal challenge from an organisational perspective.
Neil, do you find the same thing, that like with organisations, your clients you deal with, there are those kind of data silos? So how do you connect like the social media data? I mean, in retailers' case, to buying data.
Yes.
Yeah.
So coming from the technology side, obviously people naturally see data in sets of databases, that whether they be internal databases, third-party databases, or wherever that information may come from social. I think the point you made actually is the correct one. That data tends to be siloed down to the structure of the organisation, and all those databases do is reflect the way that organisation has been set up. So I absolutely agree with that. I think the big macro challenge is around organisational setup for both retailers and brands, to make sure that they consistently look at the consumer in a consistent way across the organisation. I think that the single challenge because I went through the same routes, which is the challenge. For retailers, I think it's fulfilment. So we touch on Sainsbury's. Actually, Sainsbury's challenge, although there's a user experience challenge there, and they've recognised that, their major challenge is around making sure the van's over 70% full, because if it is, they make some money. So, funnily enough, they focus on that when it goes down the street. So, fulfillment for retailers. For brands, I actually think it's maintaining a direct conversation with the consumer. I think as the world changes from a more traditional route, and I thought that the example we had earlier around, a supermarket does this and a FMCG company does this. The grocers like that world as well. They didn't want to move into a new world. It was quite stable for them, and it was about footfall and big stores. But as the world changes and actually the relationship becomes more about data and what you know about me, I think that's the big challenge for the brands. Maintaining that direct relationship as the fulfillment's increasingly held by someone else.
Mark, are you finding that a challenge at all?
Yeah, I mean, I'm now realising the problem of going third, in that I'm going to say a lot of what you just said. But no, there's definitely bits of what you both said that completely resonate with me, because I've spent a lot of time this year trying to understand what the shopper's going to look like in the future and how online is going to merge with offline. And I've come up with some stuff that I've shared with the retailers. And the big challenge that I've found, I don't think it's personal, but the big challenge I've found is just getting to the right person, the retailer, to talk to, which kind of resonates with what you were saying about organisational stuff. Because you go in, you talk to your trading contacts, or if you've got other contacts in corporate marketing or something, you talk to them. And I can tell you for a fact, based on my own experience, that no one knows who owns this digital path to purchase. From the time at which someone is sat at home watching TV or on their smartphone to the point at which they're in the store trying to buy something. No one I know, and if you do know, tell me please, in the retailer owns that. Because there's a massive opportunity for the retailers to drive loyalty by focusing on this now, which is kind of what I've been pushing with them. But there doesn't seem to be someone in their business that's really taking ownership of that shopper throughout that whole journey, which then kind of goes into what I think you were saying around the challenges of identifying your consumer and knowing your consumer and getting your brand in there, because it's the same person.
Yeah.
And if we want to drive, for example, loyalty to, you Sainsbury's as an example, because sounds like they were talking about them earlier, that's a huge opportunity for Sainsbury's. But for some reason, there just seems to be a lack of the person in there that wants to own that and wants to think about the future shopper. And I think that is the big challenge we need is to get the good stuff, which I'm sure we've all got bits of good stuff, maybe, into the right person in the retailer. And I think if we can do that, we'll definitely win, and it's not actually that complicated. I'm not so I will shut up in a minute.
Yeah.
I'm not a big, I don't really go down the data route, to be honest. I think that, that is a real common challenge people have when you talk around digital. I kind of think you need to part that a little bit and just think more around actually just the person who's going to make the purchase and how you can influence them throughout that whole journey. And that's what I think we need to nail, really.
So how are you approaching that in that respect?
Well, in terms of trying to break down
how are you doing it in your business?
To try and connect with that person?
Yeah.
Well, it starts with the strategy, so we've got the plan to do that. And, we are very aware at UB of the different places which we can interact with our consumers on that journey, and we're now trying to get the trade to work with us on delivering that. Because the other point, I know it's a later question, but it feels relevant now. The other point I think as well is to make this work, we really need to work with the retailers in a way that hasn't happened before. Because I think everyone is sort of running off and doing bits of stuff, and no one's sort of stopping and thinking, right, what should we focus on here, and we need to do it a little bit differently
So
in
someone
partnership
kind of monitors the whole customer journey. I mean, Neil, are you finding that as something that's, you were saying that it's lacking, but in terms of, maybe we're thinking more in channels when we think retailers, but like as far as the customer journey is away from the channels, just where they, from the start to finish, do you think, how could retailers really plug that gap?
I think I'm probably not going to answer your question. If that's okay. I think that this event is about people on a journey and the world changing. It's changing for retailers as well. So the way to plug the gap is to have an organisation that focuses on the consumer, not on the channel. And at the moment, not all retailers are anywhere near that maturity. So one of our and probably not hugely relevant to the guys here to be open, but one of our customers is Argos. So 50% goes through multi-channel systems now. It's took to that level of impact of sales in order to drive a business change. So I think your point's correct. I think the good thing is the retailers are starting to accept that needs to happen. But if you look at the consumer and not the channel, then that starts to happen.
Yeah, that's really fair.
And at the moment, there's change in organisation takes time. Technology changes a lot quicker than business change. So probably not answering your question, if that's okay. We'll probably just explain some of the challenges that the retailers are having. That's obviously then.
But the big challenge that or one of the big challenges we've got is we're now being led by the shopper, by the consumer. So I think previously, in an offline world, we can be very clear about how we market and how we sell, and we almost own that relationship. And because of the rate of technology development, I think the shopper is now much more in control. And I think it's even more important for that reason that we think around how we can get some of the control and influence back into that person, so we can actually start, helping them, educate them, and influencing them to, to buy stuff and to do stuff which will, benefit us all.
I mean, one word that's come up, well, one acronym that's come up today is ROI, and obviously there's so many touch points. How can we really, follow the consumer through that journey? Is that a challenge? That's beyond organisational. That's just simply technology. And
I think the organisation could look at the complete value, and I think that's again where it becomes a challenge. I think most organisations will look at ROI based on a single campaign or a single piece of work, whether that be a campaign that you take with one of the grocers, or whether it be a technology change as ROI and that distinct. What I do know the grocers, because we've dealt with 3 of them, what they do know is the complete value of a consumer across all those channels is dramatically more. So if you start at that macro level and say that defines how we then behave, that then gives you an overall ROI. I think the real challenge they have is that, if we do X, will we get some money back? And what's difficult in an organisation is that the answer to that is probably no. But we know if we do 5 of those across everything, then the overall value becomes better. So that does stop change, I think, and that's one of the structural issues that exists.
Yeah, I totally agree, and apologies for sort of coming to this late in the day and for missing out all the conversation on ROI. So I'm sorry again if I'm about to repeat something that's already been said. But I think part of the debate, part of what we've got to do, is educate people around ROI, because if you speak to, I've spoken to sort of peers and similar companies about this. Marketing directors, CEOs, they just chuck the ROI thing back at you all the time for digital, and I think that's possibly because it's an easy thing to say. So I think one of the things we need to do is move the debate on. And it's not just about ROI. Clearly that's important. But I think for as long as we're trying to, unpick ROI with all this tons of data out there, I don't think we'll ever get to a satisfactory model. So I think one of the things we absolutely must do, and we're trying to start doing this now, is just make sure it's a much wider debate and talk around the benefits of driving, consumer loyalty, and use some of the other things that that these people understand, because I think they've just all gone down this ROI funnel because it's an easy one, and it kind of gets rid of the question about what you should do with digital. So I kind of agree with you, but I think there's a need to do that bit of educating as well.
I guess it's an easy way. It's not an easy way, but it's one way of justifying the board your marketing spend. Jeremy, obviously you look at data a lot. If we can't connect the activity and its effect to the pound, but what should we be looking at?
Yeah, there's sort of short-term measures and long-term measures, and you need to think about both of those things. One of the speakers, possibly Leo, was talking about it in his long ideas, based on a question from the audience. So, thinking about the short-term return is important as the brand-building long-term return. Just another little bit on the ROI piece. It's also a little bit of a relative thing as well, because it depends. ROI can sort of live in different places in the organisation as well. And what again, this sort of comes back to organisational arrangement. You see a lot of organisations where there is a split between research and analytics. They're in 2 different areas in the business. Part of a legacy of digital coming into traditional organisations, and it's sitting around e-commerce. So it's difficult to kind of grapple with holistic or a total view of what's going on in an ROI sense, I think, for brands, which is again an organisational issue, I think.
But I guess we've touched on some of the challenges, but with these challenges become opportunities. Neil, what would you say the best way is to tackle this and prove that, this is building brand and using digital channels and getting out there to the customer?
Mainly from a retail background, I'd say sales. That's the reality of it. Whether you can attribute that to the distinct, and unfortunately, answers the question we asked before. Whether it answers the question of which piece enabled that sales is probably the difficult challenge. But that's in reality the end of it, isn't it? And including for the brands, there's a year-on-year growth with the client that needs to happen. It's sales at the end of the day. Sorry, that's probably not a very eloquent answer, but that's what it all comes down to, doesn't it?
Yeah. I guess, Mark, it's different for you because obviously it's not a case of sales. It's the retailer does that on your they're selling the product. So how do you use those digital channels to a good effect?
I mean, I personally think that sales are important. They bring revenue and everything. But I think, again, if you think around the consumer, what the consumer wants, what the shopper wants, and you kind of think past maybe some of your traditional views, if you think around like social media as a social thing, and you try and understand what people want from social activity, and it's things like making friends, and it's things like bragging, and it's things like, standing out, and I think, that is a key part of why social's really taken off. And I think the opportunity for the brands isn't necessarily to try and force like offline marketing into that space, but it's to really think around, how can you help those social consumers get what they want from that new media and facilitate them and add value to their lives. And I think if you can do that and kind of think again from the consumer's perspective and maybe not from pushing your brand message perspective and seeing your brand more as a facilitator, I personally think that's where the opportunity is. I mean, that's obviously quite challenging for a number of reasons, but I think start with the consumer again and think about what he or she wants from this whole wonderful digital world. And then I think, that's how you access it. And again, sort of work differently with retailers to try and deliver it, which sales will be a key part, obviously.
So are we kind of seeing brands and retailers becoming content producers and trying to enter that sphere by giving people more what they want and less product pushing, would you say?
I think clearly content is massively important, and you think last year people talk about social and mobile, and now I think you talk about social, mobile, and content because it is just one of the three big things you need to land. I think to make digital work, I think providing content is clearly a great thing to do, and content is absolutely king in this whole digital space. But I think it's one of the key things you need to do. So you still need to be clear around how you're going to deliver it, how people want to interact on their mobiles, and what they're going to use them for, and content is a part of it, but it's not everything, I don't think.
Do you agree, Neil?
I think it's one of the, if there was any advice, having gone through the process with Sainsbury's on a re-platforming programme, and brands wanting to influence how they're seen there, that's probably the key thing that brands can help. So you've got to remember retailers have lots of different products and short amount of resources, so any content or any information or any knowledge share that brands can bring to that play will have to influence. So I agree, I think it's one of a few things, but that's something that I think brands can really help retailers with.
Yeah, and is that bringing all those things together more in a kind of seamless, connected way?
I think it's bringing it together in a way that engages the customer. I mean, the outcome's the same for both, which is a sale at the end of the day. Obviously, from a brand perspective, there's far more interest in a single area of that category. From a retail perspective, there's a broad vision. So their ability to spend time and engage the consumer on one area is a lot less. So I just think it's something that when brands ask us, how can we help a retailer? Well, how can we make sure our product is seen better than others? That's kind of one small key area that can help.
Jeremy, can we think of some really good examples of how brands are doing that? I mean, we got Lucasade as a good example earlier on today. Red Bull's really been held up as almost the gold standard in marketing. Can you guys think of some other examples and why they really are strong?
Yeah, I think you look at the fashion space where they've embraced the whole sort of concept of being publisher brands, if you like, publishing high quality content, Net-a-Porter, magazine style content. I think there's a lot of brands in that space that are doing exceptionally well. I mean, sort of mention Burberry again, but they've got a huge amount of rich content. And again, organisationally, without sort of labouring a point here, there's a whole sort of set of skills that need to be introduced to those brands that they're not familiar with, where they haven't been publishers in that sort of way previously, that they're having to learn. And there's a role for media agencies and media brands in that process as well. So yeah, I think fashion is a pioneer in that particular area.
Neil, do you agree that fashion's kind of leading the way?
I think due to the considered nature of the product, it enables people to spend more time on those things. Selfridges is one of our clients, so they have that type of organisational structure. Who would I pick out from a grocery level? I think Coca-Cola do quite a good job. They have digital-specific packaging, digital-specific photographs, and they've obviously gone down the branded route with Ocado. So that would probably be my view on that.
We've touched on a couple of examples there where we're moving from digital and moving into more of the physical space. We mentioned was it Burberry and ASOS is one example as well from the fashion sphere where they've decided, and Net-a-Porter, they've gone into the print publishing side, and they've released the magazine. And Coca-Cola, obviously, with putting the names on the bottles, is that something that is that something that's a trend right now? Is that having a lot of pickup and pushing sales well?
It's worked for them on that campaign.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think it's been positive. It's caused some interest, but I actually think the way that they've engaged with the grocery organisations that we've seen, and the way they've listened to the way that people buy their products and design products that are appropriate for that space, I think it's probably more of a, when we say short-term gains and long-term success. Then I think they've done well there. So.
Yeah, how do you use that physical space? I mean, obviously you've got your packaging, but how do you connect the digital to the physical space?
Good question. I think the Coke example is great, and I think if you asked any person in the industry to name an example of a brand that does anything well, you'd probably pick Coke, so I think that's almost a given. I wouldn't answer your question in a moment, but I think it's also important to look at some of the smaller brands that you might not be quite as familiar with that have also done a cracking job. So Just Eat, which some of you guys probably know, and the takeaway platform that they've come up with is brilliant. They think what they've done, they've really landed digital and they've done it in a way that didn't really need much money. Back to the point on the whole sort of physical question, I think I'm going to talk from the retailer's perspective, the retailers that are starting to think around how you can bring physical and digital together, I think are the ones that are set to win. And you obviously be aware about Tesco with their Blinkbox property, and they've just brought out their huddle. I think they're at the start of something really quite interesting with that, because they've just started thinking around how they can integrate Blinkbox into their offline shop, which is absolutely the way to go. They've obviously got their huddle thing which has come out, it's quite interesting. So I think they're at the start of quite an interesting journey, and it's all around bringing what people want from physical and what people want from digital into the space where again the same consumer is. So that's what I think I'd say about that.
And conversely, and interestingly, so eBay guy's still here. There he is, hand up. eBay, you guys are getting into the pop-up shops. That I saw one in Bond Street last Christmas.
Yeah, we did pop-up shops last Christmas. I think that's one example. I think more recently we've started a trial with Argos, whereby eBay goods will be purchased. You can buy on eBay goods from multiple retailers on Argos. So I think the idea of integrating the online and the offline experience is a way forward for us.
Yeah, eBay as well as Amazon too, looking to have a physical touch point too, in as much that part of that buying journey is sometimes actually deciding I don't want this and returning it, and it's quite, if you can be a retailer and own that whole process from start to finish, then I think personally, on my point of view, I think that's a strong basis for a good business offer. We've got some time for some questions from the audience, if anyone wants to ask our panel. Got one here at the front. Just got the mic around here anyway.
It's all right, I can speak.
Okay, shoot.
Do you think that we can touch all the whole range of customers, the broad age range, and all the consumers, all the demographic, or do we have more representation from a small part of the demographic of our customer base?
So, sorry, can you reword that question?
Through digital, do we reach all the demographic?
The whole demographic,
customer base?
yeah.
Or
Is it just-
are there any underrepresented categories?
Yeah, Neil, maybe. Do you think it's?
Well, from our experience with the retailers, then I'd say all demographics. So a very interesting one for us was we work with Boots. We had feedback from all demographics on a consistent basis. So I think it's probably more to do with the brand, the offer, or the retailer that decides the demographic more than the physical channel would be our experience.
Jeremy, I'm sure you.
Yeah, well, I think generally in the UK, internet penetration is very high, and it stretches across all age ranges, but all demographics. But there are some areas where it's more used for certain types of behaviour. So we know from some previous research that we've done on online grocery buying that new mums index very highly. Part of the reason for that is they can't get out of the house when they've just had a baby, so online grocery shopping is convenient to them. But if you look at online grocery shopping with an older age range, then empty nesters, for example, then it's very low. Now, that's today. That may change in the future as those new mums migrate to couples, empty nester couples. So, and that behaviour sticks over time. But I certainly think there's sort of disparate levels.
Mark, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's it's probably a fair summary. I mean, I think my answer to your question would be yes, you can touch everyone, but you touch them in slightly different ways. I think Nielsen have predicted that in 2015 there's going to be 40% GB household penetration for online grocery shopping, which is quite a big number. And clearly some of them are going to shop regularly, some of them are less regularly. But it also means there's 60% that aren't shopping online for groceries. However, I think you shouldn't neglect them because some of them will probably be shopping on Amazon. A lot of them probably shopping on eBay. So, the opportunity for us is to understand what they like about that and what we can bring from that into their grocery online shopping experience whilst driving the frequency up for the rest of the marketplace. So there always, I'm sure, will be some stalwart technology rejectors or whatever the expression is, but I think that's probably like 5% of the global, the GB population, which means we've got 95% to pay for. So I think, again, just try and understand what they're using it for and how they use it, and then I think that makes a massive opportunity.
We had a question in the back, guy in the white shirt.
Thanks. I think part of the sort of consumer journey, like I think bigger ticket items, like I'm not thinking like groceries, moving it a little bit higher. Like consumer electronics, like they often go to like a store to like talk to an expert or to seek some sort of like reassurance, even if they've kind of already made up their mind for someone. So I'm thinking like I've seen some sort of like those chat features like on like online shopping websites. Do you guys have sort of any insight as to if they're actually like taken advantage of by consumers, and B, if they're effective in kind of reintroducing that sort of element of trust and sort of like one-on-one relationship with a salesperson that you can get offline?
Yeah, Jeremy, you might be next to.
Yes, there are brands using that, and I guess it's sort of there's the finessing and the finer detail of the utility of the experience that you're providing that can kind of vary, and that has an impact on performance. But also further upstream is knowing where in the customer journey to serve that experience up to the consumer online can be a challenge for brands. But yeah, the personal touch is a huge differentiation opportunity.
So we can add to that. We've seen that impact both average order value in quite a substantial way, but also conversion rates, both in insurance and retail. So it does have an impact. Your point's absolutely correct. It's at what point in the journey do you push that conversation in, and also secondly, what type of product set justifies the expenditure for that, because it doesn't work if it's a non-trained personnel. We've seen, if it's someone knowledgeable about the product that adds a value and provides that trust element, then that's a positive, but that obviously comes at a cost as part of the sales cycle.
Yeah, I mean, from a retailer perspective, having the person to be online for that chat and then know about the whole product portfolio is actually quite a challenge. Mark, did you want to add?
No, I mean, I've got no direct experience of that, but I think what you've described is a really good example of how you can bring something good that people like about offline shopping into online. So you've taken that personal interaction that shoppers and consumers want and perhaps can't get when they're buying something over the internet, but by facilitating an online chat with a knowledgeable person, you've sort of done a bit of the best of both worlds. So I just think it's a good example of how the two can merge successfully. Would be what I'd add.
How much time do we have for questions? Got one here at the front. Yeah.
I just had a question regarding, I think, one from the manufacturer, so Johnson & Johnson, and I think one of the challenges we're really seeing is depending on what the objective really is of the retailer. So some of the conversations will be around wanting to really collaborate with the manufacturer and really work on conversion, insight in that part of the purchase versus other retailers really looking at it as an income stream. I think there's still, depending on where you're kind of, in terms of the structure who you're speaking to, that still seems to be different depending on the retailers you're working with. So I was just interested in, that's Mark's view.
Yeah, honestly, I'd totally relate to that. And I suppose I need to watch what I say here since I don't know in the room, but I've had conversations with all the retailers over the last couple of years, and it's been really interesting to notice how some of them have moved from that completely to a much more collaborative point of view. And I think there's been massive improvement. The point I was making earlier was it's still difficult sometimes to get to the right person, but there was one retailer, first conversation, that completely, last conversation, totally changed. It's interesting to note as well that another retailer who shall remain nameless, but might be a bit obvious based on what I'm about to say, who has been a bit later than others to join the online party in terms of selling stuff. Initial meeting with that retailer was very much around the transactional, you've got to pay to play here, not about collaboration at all. So I'm glad that you've had similar experience, but I think it breaks down, and I think as soon as, back to the point of making partnerships, as soon as you can start developing these mutually beneficial partnerships, I think it does evaporate. And just to sort of make an organisational point as well, I think it helps having the relationships outside the sales teams, because they're going to want to sell and buy, because that's what they do. But I think if you can find ways to develop them that don't have that, then I think that makes it a bit easier still to move away from that transactional stuff.
Can I?
So is that partly why you've part the ROI discussions as well? We're still, it's very difficult, I think, based on the rates, not necessarily.
Yeah, I think we're probably not completely part of them, so I'm sorry if I gave that impression. I think the point I was trying to make was that it's not just about that. So of course we still want to invest money and see a return from it, and there's different ways of modelling that. But I think it's important to recognise that there's so much more to play for than just getting a commercial return. And I think that's where we can probably all help educate the people that might not be in that place to help them see the benefits of that.
Agreed. I mean, a lot of us held up John Lewis as an advertising model, and Craig Inglis, the marketing director, spoke to him, and he said, like, we didn't start with an ROI, we actually just started with an idea, a big idea, and I think that's probably the way forward for a lot of brands. I think, thank you, Jeremy, Neil, and Mark, and I think that wraps us up.